Welcome. This video is about monoprinting. Monoprinting is a way to transfer an image onto another surface. In this case, we're using underglaze and monoprinting onto slip. Mono means one, so this is a one-time use printing technique. So to show you what it looks like in the end, I just want to start from there. So I have my finished monoprint surface, which I will show you how to get there in just a minute. I have my surface, which in this case is a slab, but you could certainly put monoprinting on another design form, such as a cup or a bowl or slab-built object. It has to be fairly flat in order to transfer it. It doesn't have to be flat like this, but you can't have a lot of ridges and things like that. So it has to be fairly flat surface in general. So I've painted my last layer of underglaze on, and this is my background color, and it's just dried so that it is not shiny anymore. If I made this another day, I might have to slightly mist it down. Now I'm going to put it onto my piece, and I want to make sure I seal it on. I don't want any air bubbles, and I also don't want to kind of over press it and tear my paper. So if you've ever made a temporary tattoo, it kind of works the same way, right? I'm transferring something onto another surface. I might need to get this a little damper, so I might get a damp sponge and dab it on. I want to make sure I don't wiggle or move this paper around and distort my design, so I am holding it down in another area. And then I might take a rubber or metal rib and gently press to again ensure that I have removed any air bubbles and that the underglaze has fully adhered to the clay. My goal is to get it to remove from the paper. I'm using newsprint, and there's other papers people like to use, but newsprint is pretty easily accessible and works quite well for this. So then when I have it on there, I'm gonna maybe check and see how's it going. And it looks like it's transferring pretty well. If I feel like, oh, not quite there, maybe I'll go back and seal it on a little more. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to carefully peel it up. If I hold my paper at a dramatic angle, so like this, instead of like this, I feel like I get a better image transfer. And that is monoprinting right there. So I've just transferred my image over, and you can see I've lost some of my detail, so not all of it has pulled onto the clay. So just know that that's pretty normal. So you will have some gaps. So keep that in mind when you're making your design. You might also, once this is not too damp, so I probably wouldn't do it at this point, but damp, still damp-ish, but dry enough that it won't stick, I'm going to take my pony roller or brayer and see, you can see it's a little too damp, roll it over to help make sure this adheres. But essentially, that is monoprinting. So how did we get here? I started with a blank piece of newsprint, or again, you could use other paper, and I drew on it first with a fine tip liner. And you could certainly use a paintbrush for this as well. I find that this is a great way, though, to get really fine details. So I'm going to transfer my design on here. And if you wanted to, you could draw it in pencil first and trace it, right? So I've already completed all of this. I'm not going to spend time doing that. So then I filled in my color. So I filled in my blue. And you can see on my example how I didn't fill it in super, super neatly. I did fill outside of the lines. That's part of a design choice that you need to make, right? How cleanly or how generally do you want to fill this in? So I would fill all of this in. And then finally, I would add that top layer, right? So this is the point at which I would add my background layer, right? And what I find to be maybe the most confusing part of monoprinting for everyone is that you're working backwards in two ways. First of all, you're working backwards in that I'm starting with what's going to end on top, right? So these black lines are going to be the first thing that are on top of my surface, and then I'm filling in from there, right? So I have my black lines, then I have to think about the blue lines, then I have to think about the background color. I'm also reversing the image. So it's not as obvious when you're doing something like this, but if you were writing with text, you would have to write it backwards. So a trick for that is to write it in marker on one side and to trace it in the other side with your liner. That's monoprinting.